The Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, has resigned, ending what the opposition calls 15 years of dictatorship and triggering celebrations across the country before Hasina's resignation. The demonstrations in Bangladesh since July have eventually triggered a political earthquake. The protests originated from economic factors and quickly transformed into a political demand for Hasina's resignation. Since July, the people of Bangladesh have taken to the streets to protest and have even clashed with the military and police at times. At least 150 people died and thousands were injured due to violent incidents that month. On July 21st, after weeks of protests, the Supreme Court of Bangladesh decided to reject the previous ruling to restore the quota system, reducing the quota for relatives of veterans to 5%. 93% of government positions will be open for merit-based recruitment in society. But after the curfew and other restrictions were lifted later in July, the situation suddenly took a sharp turn. The protests entered the second stage and shifted more towards political demands. The demonstrators' demands include seeking justice for those killed and injured in the protests, demanding Hasina's resignation, promoting national reforms, and improving the employment and education systems. Entering August, the momentum of the protest movement has not abated. The Chief of Army Staff of Bangladesh, General Hasina, said in a television speech that the country's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigned and left the country on the same day, and a provisional government would be established soon to administer the country. The provisional government will immediately take over the power and ask citizens to maintain their trust in the military. I ask everyone to be patient and give us some time. Together, we can solve all problems, Hasina said. Please do not return to the path of violence. Please return to the path of non-violent peace. After Hasina's resignation, some of the people, especially supporters of the opposition, celebrated Hasina's resignation, considering it a victory of their protests and the end of the so-called dictatorship. They took to the streets, cheering and expressing their expectations for the new political situation. On the other hand, some people felt sorry for Hasina's departure. They believed that Hasina had promoted domestic infrastructure construction during her tenure in office and made certain contributions in areas such as health, education, and energy. However, regardless of the people's attitudes, Hasina's resignation marks a significant transformation in Bangladesh's political landscape, and the future development is full of uncertainties. According to relevant reports, Hasina fled Bangladesh by military helicopter on Monday and headed for India, a powerful ally of the former leader. Immediately after that, thousands of people rushed into the Prime Minister's residence. They shouted slogans, sung and celebrated, and even looted the residence. So, why did this historic moment occur? What exactly happened on Sunday? On Sunday alone, as many as more than 90 people were tragically killed. The conflict between security officials and demonstrators continued to intensify and escalate. Demonstrators strongly demanded Hasina's resignation. The police fired rubber bullets and released tear gas at a large group of protesters in Shahbag Square, in the capital Dhaka, in the Sirajganja district in the northwest. Demonstrators also attacked a police station, resulting in the death of at least 13 police officers. The death toll on Sunday set a new record for the highest single-day death toll since the protests broke out last month. The authorities imposed an extremely strict shoot-on-sight curfew policy at 6 p.m. on Sunday 12 GMT. Subsequently, the police and the military flooded the streets, dedicated to restoring normal social order. But earlier on Monday, thousands of people completely disregarded the curfew regulations and marched without scruples or restraint, although there were reports indicating conflicts in areas outside the capital. Al Jazeera correspondent Tanvir Chowdhury, reporting from Dhaka, said that, however, when protesters began presenting flowers to the military at noon and officers also warmly embraced demonstrators. It was obvious that the situation changed significantly. Soon people are relieved. This cruel repression is finally over. Hasina's political career is over. So, what initially triggered this protest? The demonstration kicked off in Dhaka in July and was initially led by students who were extremely angry about the court's restoration of the employment quota plan that was revoked in 2018. This policy stipulated that 30% of government jobs were reserved for descendants of veterans who fought bravely in the 1971 War of Independence, the vast majority of whom were associated with Hasina's Awami League, which led the independence movement. In addition, 26% of the jobs were allocated to women, the disabled and ethnic minorities. As a result, about 3,000 job vacancies were left. Shockingly, 400,000 graduates will take the civil service examination to fiercely compete for these few positions. You should know that 1/5 of the 170 million people in Bangladesh are unemployed. Hasina called the protesters Razakars, a term referring to those who cooperated with Pakistan during the 1971 war. After that, rallies against the quota system became more intense and larger in scale. During the period from July 10th to July 20th, it was the most serious period of unrest during Hasina's 15-year tenure, with more than 180 people tragically losing their lives. The police said that protesters severely damaged property and also burned government buildings, including a national television station. The Supreme Court revoked the job quota policy on July 21st and ruled that 93% of the jobs would be converted to be open to the most qualified candidates. However, even so, as students and other citizens gathered in a new round of rallies, the protest activities still showed no sign of abating. They strongly called for justice for the victims and put forward a new and unique demand: Hasina's resignation. Hasina and her cabinet members have shown an extremely provocative attitude from the beginning to the end, accusing the opposition of deliberately inciting protests without mercy. Just on Sunday, Hasina even denounced the protesters as terrorists. Why has Hasina, who has been successfully elected prime minister for times, become unpopular now? The 76-year-old Hasina is the world's longest-serving female head of government. She is the daughter of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the founding father of Bangladesh. Hasina was first elected prime minister successfully in 1996 and was re-elected again in 2009. Her total tenure as prime minister amounts to 20 years, although Hasina won her fourth consecutive victory in this year's election. She has been accused of suppressing the opposition and other dissenting individuals, meticulously planning disappearances and arranging extrajudicial executions. Hasina firmly denies these accusations, however, as student protesters became bolder in July and even shouted loudly, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sheikh Hasina is a dictator. Analysts speculate that Hasina may have difficulty withstanding this greatest challenge to her rule. Political analyst Mubashar Hassan told Al Jazeera after the news of Hasina's downfall emerged on Monday, "A dictator has finally fallen." He said he has been in exile in Australia for many years. Television footage showed protesters in Dhaka climbing a huge statue of Hasina's father and vigorously chipping off the head of the statue with an axe. "This is an incredible moment. This is like the second independence of Bangladesh," he said. Bangladesh has long been shackled by the tyranny of Sheikh Hasina and her regime. Since 2018, I have been unable to return to Bangladesh and sincerely hope I can see my family as soon as possible. Was the deployment of the military a turning point? Hassan pointed out that the government's decision to deploy the military to deal with the protesters seemed to be the key turning point that led to the collapse of Hasina's rule in Bangladesh. The military is largely regarded as a neutral entity and is trusted and respected by the majority. In 2008, the election crisis plunged the country into a serious political deadlock. The military intervened in time and ensured that the election was held in December of that year. As the latest protests continued to escalate, the military was extremely cautious in its statements, seemingly striving to maintain a neutral stance. However, on Friday, former military personnel explicitly expressed their support for the protests and sharply criticized the decision to withdraw the border patrol to quell the demonstrations. Former Army Chief Karim Yan even changed his Facebook profile picture to red to indicate his support, undoubtedly hinting at the general sentiment within the military. Professor Naomi Hussain of the School of African and Oriental Studies in the UK pointed out that another CRUCIAL turning point was that people were worried that there would be an extremely bloody massacre on Monday, because even though there were killings on Sunday, protesters still began to mobilize again. People have very real and sufficient reasons to worry that there will be a scene of rivers of blood today, she said on Monday. People are extremely afraid that today will be a massacre. So this indeed prompts the military to seriously consider exactly what actions they need to take. What will the new government look like and how will it develop next? The specific details of how the interim government will be formed are still unclear at present. But Zaman said that he is in talks with major political parties, including the opposition Bangladesh Nationalist Party. The current situation is that it is still not clear whether the military will seize power directly, like in the past several military coups. Student activists have stated that they firmly reject military rule. Hussain said, "We definitely can't afford such consequences. We sincerely hope that the army can maintain peace and introduce some kind of interim system to lead us back to democracy." Zaman also declared that as the calls for justice have grown stronger, a comprehensive investigation will be launched into the deaths during the weeks of protests. The general said, "I solemnly assure all of you that we will definitely seek justice for all murder cases and injustices. We sincerely ask you to trust the country's military. I take full responsibility and I assure you not to be disheartened." According to relevant reports from Indian media, Hasina arrived in Agartala, the capital of Tripura in northeastern India, along with her sister,